All right. Yeah. So Darude Sandstorm, right? This came from Vice actually. They had a series on like the 90s one-hit wonders, right?
Yeah. Which we were kind of just talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. And like so it was where's he from? Like Sweden or something? I think like Stockholm or something.
Yeah.
Just some guy dicking around on the synthesizer and like, was essentially just making tracks for no one. And then, this one just blows like, becomes super famous.
It's just like a local DJ.
Yeah, something like that. And like the whole thing, like the reason it's called Sandstorm was because when you turned on the synthesizer, that was the first like instrument selected.
Is like a preset?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
that sound is literally just like the default sound that came out of that particular synthesizer.
Okay,
model. Yeah. And like, have you tried looking up at like anything else he ever did? Right?
Darude? No, it doesn't ring a bell.
Like, just nothing recognizable, right?
Okay,
like,
so he's really just like a
one-hit wonder. Yeah. But like that song was huge at the time. Like it was played at like clubs everywhere, right?
I think it was like I remember hearing it in like some of the video games. Like that was when
video games like what?
Wasn't it in like the original like Grand Theft Auto or something? I think it was like some game that had that in it too.
Grand Theft Auto, yeah. Before my time, unfortunately.
I think that was when games first started like using actual like licensed music. Somewhere around that time. Could have been slightly later.
Like Grand Theft Auto used to be like a top-down game, right? Like that was the first one I ever played. Was it the original Vice City? Well, I shouldn't even say I played it. I watched my friends play while like...
Vice City was the first one you played?
Well, I didn't even play it, right? I just watched him play it. Yeah, I mean, this was like another like Russian family friend. And so... I guess my friend of the two was like a year older, and then his brother was like 4 years older, and so like we just basically watched him play on his computer.
Okay, yeah.
And you'd ask to have a turn, and he'd like look at you and be like, "No."
Okay, yeah.
Which fair enough now.
It was like it was a computer game that I think was top down, and I don't remember like the PS one GTA was just like a huge breakthrough.
That was the 3D one, right?
Yeah, that was the first 3D one.
Wait, what was that one? That was Vice City?
No, it was just called Grand Theft Auto.
Just Grand Theft Auto. I'm trying to think what.
I think it was just called Grand Theft Auto, and then Vice City was the second PS one.
So this must have been before that. Yeah, man. It was like
it was a PC. There was one on PC. If I top down kind of.
But so this was like, so they had Darude on there, on the one you're thinking of?
I might be misremembering it. I think it was like there's a few around that time, like Tony Hawk Pro Skater had, or there's some of those like skater games that had licensed music, I think. Early PS1 era.
Pro Skater was a big one for that kind of stuff, right? Like there's a lot of like, but is that new? Yeah.
It was the first, okay, so I'm looking it up now, and first one was in 1997, just called Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto 2, yeah. So yeah, Vice City was like looks like the third one here. But yeah, they started licensing a lot of that like kind of punk music from that time as well as kind of like the techno stuff like Darude or whatever
on like the radio channels, right? That you could flip through while you're causing mayhem.
Yeah.
But yeah, like so Darude's like blows up out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
Huge, right? And now like is he even what do you think Darude's up to now?
He's probably still playing shows, right?
You think so?
I would guess. I mean,
you think so?
I would guess people would show up and
I'm curious. Do you think we could get tickets to see Darude?
I'm sure I'm sure it'd probably come out to something like Ultra out here, or some kind of festival.
What's
Agefar or something?
Up to
I could see
now?
him coming out to Agefare in
Yeah, kind
in
of like
Odaiba,
retro.
and like,
Yeah.
well, I mean, they're literally playing that last year
Yeah.
there, so I wouldn't be surprised if he literally showed up and appeared.
It's kind of random though. I mean, like at the time you would have thought that this is the next, I don't know, Tiesto or whatever, like Avicii or whatever, like worldwide techno sensation.
Oh, but it wasn't. That was way before like EDM or any of those.
Yeah, but I mean, there were nightclubs, right? They're playing electronic music and dropping ecstasy in the 90s, right?
Not really in America though. I read this interesting discussion that I think it was W. David Marks or Marksy, who's living in Tokyo and is a writer.
David D. Marksy.
W. David Marks.
Any relation to Karl Marx?
I, other than being a analyst of
his great grandfather or something,
or Groucho Marx maybe in there too. The Marx brothers, right? There's a few of them.
Were they all communist?
Marx brothers, they had some political content, if I remember right. Was it? So he was analyzing this movie called Go from like 1998 or something, and it's like he was just pointing out that like the whole rave thing never really happened in the U.S. But they're like, there's people that like thought that it was going to be sort of the next thing. So this movie Go is this like pseudo Tarantino type movie that's like kind of has this like raver backdrop. Like the intro credits are like, it's kind of like Enter the Void or something, or it has these like, you know, nightclub raver scenes that are supposed to take place in like Las Vegas or something.
Yeah.
But it's like in real life, it like never really happened that way. Like it was never really, there wasn't like that sort of club scene in the same way there was like in Europe or the UK.
Yeah, it was really like a UK thing, right?
It's a UK
basically.
thing. Like Gatecrasher and stuff. But
they have like weird laws there that made like all the warehouse rave stuff possible.
Yeah.
Like it was some, like you could break into like a warehouse,
throw some party or something.
Yeah, and it was something like basically if you like occupied it, then it is considered your abode or something. Like the threshold for like a building to be considered
occupied.
Was like really weird. Like you just had to like have people and have water or something, like then it's like an abode. Then police can't come in. Something like that. I don't know.
I just feel like that. I mean, we were kind of talking about this with the music now. I just think sort of that like 90s authenticity culture just like had a hard time with that sort of take, because like, I mean, like rave culture is like really social and like fun and like not necessarily serious. And like 90s kind of Gen X was on that like authenticity, you know, heroin loner kind of slacker trip that we were sort of talking about. So I think they had a really hard time with sort of integrating that, and like there's that whole thing like, you know, disco is gay, and it sort of like was, and
it was gay.
Yeah, I mean, like where would you?
What's gayer than being like, oh, my feelings?
Yeah,
right?
Well, that's the way it seems now, right? I mean, it seems emo stuff seems way more kind of gay.
I mean, like I'm saying that because I regret being like sucked into that way of thinking, right? As a teen, like I prided myself on like being angsty or whatever, and like why?
Yeah, well, exactly right. It's sort of like the difference between like Joy Division and New Order, right? So Joy Division is like that. You know, you're like still seeing people wearing those shirts with the.
What's Joy Division? I
Joy Division. It's this like Manchester, kind of like post-punk band.
Okay.
From like the early '80s, and quite famous also for production. I mean, we're just talking about Steve Albini, who's just passed, and I think it was Martin Hannett, the Joy Division producer, who was like creating all these like weird textured kind of echoes with the sound, right? So Joy Division is this really depressing band. It's really like gothic, dark kind of music. And much like we were just talking about. I think it was their second album. The singer just went home and hanged himself. Ian Curtis.
Just like on a Tuesday or something.
Yeah, literally just like on a Tuesday. He's like, that's it, you know. And then he's hanging from the rafters, right?
Okay.
So, and they're starting to get quite they're starting to get quite big before this. And they just had this song "Love Will Tear Us Apart." There was you probably heard if you heard it you definitely recognize it. So the rest of the band is like, well, what do we like do now, right? Because the singer's just committed suicide, and we're kind of still into this like music gig, right? So they decided to just keep going, like
just replaced him with a different singer.
That's the thing, is like they just didn't even do that.
Just didn't even bother with the singer.
So the bassist was just like, well, I guess I can like kind of sing, right?
How hard could it possibly be, right?
How hard could it possibly be, right? So they changed their name from Joy Division to New Order.
Okay.
And in some ways they kind of became even bigger than Joy Division had even been. Well, like Blue Monday.
Well, I know the Kurt Vonnegut "Goodbye Blue Mondays" like.
Yeah, well, the song Blue Monday.
Who ripped off who? Since we're talking about rip-offs and posers,
I don't know if it's I think it's just a phrase, or I don't know if there's a origin.
Well, according to Kurt, and sorry if this is diverting your point here, but like "Goodbye Blue Mondays" was like a slogan from I don't know if it was a fictitious washing machine company.
Okay, yeah.
And the idea was like Blue Monday was supposed to be like laundry day. Like that's what you would refer to, like laundry day.
Yeah.
You do it on Monday, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so the slogan "Goodbye Blue Mondays" was, like you no longer had to
worry about laundry. Yeah.
Like the machine just does it for you, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of this is Vonnegut's, I don't know, syphilis-addled mind.
I don't think he had syphilis,
no.
But Kurt Vonnegut.
I might be confusing him with one of his story characters who was ravaged by syphilis.
I'd be surprised if I think he's a little bit late to have syphilis. I mean, I guess he could have gotten it in World War II, but even that, I think he was probably pretty young to, I don't know.
Depends how hard he was partying.
It depends on how hard he was partying, yeah. So they turned into New Order, and they started releasing these like more like, I guess, like dance kind of tracks that were like
straight up like EDM, like techno or something. Or
yeah, I mean they're sort of like bringing in that. This was when that like rave culture was first starting, like Factory Records, and so they created that like Hacienda, the nightclub in the UK.
In the UK,
the Hacienda.
Okay, yeah, sounds famous.
Which is a term from like situationism too, which we're also just talking about. The Hacienda must be built. It was one of the slogans.
And they weren't referring to the nightclub back then.
Well, I mean, yeah,
I guess the
nightclub
not,
owner, the nightclub owner was Tony Wilson was aware of that. So that whole music like started going in that direction, where they're like, rather than hanging ourselves, we could just like go to the club and do some ecstasy and kind of like have fun, right?
Sounds like a good direction to go into.
Yeah,
I think right?
It was, right. I mean, that's some of the best music, like Happy Mondays, New Order, all of that kind of scene was coming out then. But the US was still like in trying to think like, half of it was like Metallica, and then the rest of it was like, I don't know, Guns N' Roses, and like,
it was all very guitar or drum heavy, right?
Power ballads, like White Snake and like hair metal. Yeah, it was like hair metal,
glamcore.
So yeah, and so in the US you had like that kind of stuff, and then in the UK it was like, working class people in jeans, like creating rave music and doing ecstasy and like going clubbing and raving. So it was like totally. So I feel like the US just didn't really. I mean, they did have like techno clubs like Detroit and stuff, but it never like had that same mainstream sort of appeal, I guess. Well, even in the 90s, like we were talking about the Gen X thing. I think there's that Britpop in the UK with Oasis versus Blur, right? And like
I know Oasis, I don't know Blur.
Yeah, well, so they both started as these kind of Britpop bands, and Oasis is much more derivative and simple and kind of Beatles worship, whereas Blur was more like they had the Girls and Boys song, like more like kind of techno and much more all over the place, right? And I think there was some comment where like Metallica says something like, yeah, like Oasis is like at least real, like we don't really understand British people anyway, but like Oasis at least is like real rock and roll, and like Blur seems like some weird gay disco shit or something, right? Like they just couldn't really process it. But obviously, like if you look at it now, I mean, like Blur is just like way, way much better music and was just all over the place. And Damon Albarn created Gorillaz, right?
Yeah.
Like Oasis is not gonna.
Oh wait, so he's from Blur originally?
It's
okay. I had no idea.
So Damon Albarn was like, he was like sort of. I mean, we were just talking about NSYNC, right? So Damon Albarn and the boys of Blur, like Alex James, like they're sort of like the early mid '90s British NSYNC in a way, but except they played instruments, right? But they're like all super good looking dudes. Like they're like really stylish, and they're kind of like funny, and they're like joking around and stuff, right?
But yeah, just the archetypal like group of high profile guys, talented, artists.
And they're all kind of like secretly actually kind of geniuses, right? But if you just saw them at first at a time, you'd be like, oh, it's just some weird British boy band or something, right? But they're way, way better than they needed to be. So they even kind of towards the end of the 90s, they got kind of infected by the Gen X like cynicism thing, and they started like I think doing heroin, and they got kind of like a little bit more out there with the music. Eventually, like they get to the point where Damon's kind of like, because he's like used to being the frontman and super getting all this attention. So he's eventually like, well, what if I just like literally put myself behind a curtain and just like kept singing? Like, would anyone care, right?
It's like reverse Daft Punk or something.
Yeah. So he's like, what if I just like made music, and instead of being like out in front and center, I was just like behind a curtain. And so then he teamed up with Jamie Hewlett, the comic artist, and who created Tank Girl and those characters for Gorillaz, like with
like the sort of animal looking like hybrid cartoon.
Yeah. So they created the Hewlett and Damon from Blur created these like Gorillaz characters. So it was gonna be like, it was like this fictional band, right? so that's sort of the origin of that. But it's actually just literally the frontman from Blur who's behind all that. So yeah, like Oasis never would have like thought to do that.
Yeah, I mean, what again? Like, you know, bird's eye view, Wonderwall, and that's it, right?
Yeah,
like,
well, that's, I mean, yeah, like, so their horizons don't really extend much beyond that, I guess.
Yeah, there's something to that, like multi-genre musical genius type character. Like the one I'm most familiar is Richie Houghton.
Right,
Plastic Man.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I don't know what his other aliases are, but I think he has or had at one point like 7 different music aliases simultaneously. Like, how it's just crazy to imagine.
Yeah. There's like Aphex Twin, I think, was a little bit like that too. He was like going off in other directions or something.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like Aphex Twin, though, he kept it all under his single like identity, right? Like he had some other side suit, like some other name, side projects or something. Maybe.
I'd have to look him up.
But I mean, even under Aphex Twin, he has like, you know, the kind of classic ambient stuff, like Select Ambient Works.
Selected Ambient Works,
yeah.
You should listen to Blur, man. I always like, I go back and forth on this with my British friends because like some of them, it's a bit of a love-hate thing because it's like the, you know, like the Northern England, like Manchester and stuff is very like, you know, the Fall and Joy Division, and it's like very working class, like kind of take. And then I guess like bands from the South, like Blur, well, that's the whole thing with Blur Oasis too, is like Blur, you know, Oasis is from the North. They're like, you know, working class. They're like more legit, right? And then Blur is from the South. They're like art school kids, and you know, they're kind of like middle class or something, right? So there's this bit of rivalry, right? That based on that, and but I think now most people are sort of able to see it a little bit more clearly. And it's Blur is an amazing band. It's like all over the place and changing genres, styles.
What's their most famous song? I'm totally drawing a blank.
It's another one you'd recognize if you heard it. It's called Song 2. And it goes like, this is literally all I have to do. It's like the song that starts out with "Woohoo!"
Okay, of course. Yeah.
That's literally what it is. Right? So I've just demonstrated the
genius of it all, right?
Yeah. And I think that's like something they
cocaine in the song.
Yeah,
from the sounds of it.
Right? I think they wrote that in like 7 minutes or something, and it was just like a throwaway joke, right? And I think they were like trying to make fun of like, you know, Nirvana or something, because there was this rivalry where they're like, so like the whole Gen X, like 90s you know, kind of heroin and Seattle misery thing was like starting to creep over to England too, where people were happily, you know, taking ecstasy and partying and, you know, sharing love and warehouse parties. So then the American stuff started showing up, and it's like, you know, like kill yourself with heroin and wear plaid and dress like a lumberjack. And so it started actually kind of like influencing it for a little bit.
In the UK?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And so Blur were like, this is like, you know, I think there's like some Nirvana song called like I Hate Myself and I Want to Die or something.
Okay. Sounds likely.
So Damon Albarn from Blur is like
a bit of a cry for help if you think about it.
Yeah, I think it might have been. I think it might have been Oasis actually or something. Like they said, like they were like listening to it and they're like, yeah, like fuck that, like we want to have fun, right? So yeah, so a lot of it was like Britpop bands were like consciously trying to be like, we're not American, like we're wearing bright colors, we're making fun music, you know, we're kind of being silly and like there's a sense of humor. So they recorded that one Blur song kind of like almost as a parody, I think, but then it actually became a hit. So they're like, all right, well, whatever, I guess, right? But most of their other stuff doesn't really sound anything like that. Like they have that song "Girls and Boys," which is club.
You sang in that karaoke,
yeah,
right?
it's a classic kind of club track, and they have all kinds of stuff. Like they have more like rock kind of stuff. They have ballads. They have like techno kind of stuff. They have like really weird, noisy songs. Just like changing constantly and doing weird, creative things. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, like my strongest influence in that genre, I guess, even though it's like years, decades apart, I guess, is Billy Talent. Right?
Oh yeah. Well, he's kind of a punk background too. I mean, it's sort of
so Billy Talent is a group of 4 people, right?
Yeah.
Named after a character from some movie, I think.
Okay, but, I think it was. Aren't they like sort of punk too, though?
Yeah, like at the time it was considered like alternate music or something. Alternate. I don't know. But yeah, essentially it was like punk, emo. I don't know, like where's the line even? Anyway, like sad, angsty, like teenage boy targeted. Like guitar solo, heavy, angsty. Borderline suicidal type stuff. Like,
that's another weird one, because emo came out of this like 80s hardcore punk with this band called Rites of Spring. It sounded very different from what we would, like it definitely doesn't sound anything like, like My Chemical Romance or something. But so that went through a weird kind of, I don't know, purity spiral, and then created these like weird other offshoots and stuff for a long time. But it's another weird kind of sidetrack through the 90s, like that more hardcore punk emo kind of side.
It's got to be weird to like, I don't know. I guess part of art is like, I have this pain inside me and I need to like express it somehow. But, you bring in like capitalism, and, maybe they tried to write happy songs before it. But this is what like hit, right? Like his girlfriend broke up with him and they wrote this sad song, and suddenly like people are paying attention to them, and now they're like, okay, well, now I guess I need to be depressed for the rest of my life. Right?
Yeah, get locked into it. Trapped into enacting it or reenacting it.
Just become like, I don't know.
We gotta think. You gotta think like some of these, like Korn or like Limp Bizkit or something. Like you probably like, it must feel weird to be like, I don't know, 57 and you're like going out and virtually like cosplaying as your 22-year-old self and singing things that you wrote like, I don't know, 30 years ago, or things that
trying to like reconnect with that, and like, I know I have one more like hit song in me. Like,
I don't think they're even concerned with that. I mean, I think they're just like totally.
They've just become that.
They're just playing to the crowd. I mean, I like, is like Limp Bizkit or something, are they like releasing new music? Really? I don't think so.
They're still performing from what I've heard, though.
But that's
apparently
what I mean,
like know how to put on a show too. Apparently it's worth checking out. I doubt they come to Tokyo, but
I was talking about this with someone else the other day, actually, and I just think like probably like Fred Durst is like actually probably pretty chill or like smart. Like he probably is like sitting at home with his kids, like watching some like David Lynch film or Fellini or something, and then his day job is like he goes out and he's like, break stuff, or like he does like he does something like that. But in his own time,
it's a living.
Yeah, in his spare time, he's probably just like reading a book or something, or being like a dad or something, and then he's got to go act out this angry teenager for money. Yeah. I
mean, pays the bills, right?
Yeah.
But I was at your suggestion, I've been reading Prometheus Rising.
Okay,
right, and he just for context, he goes into basically like Timothy Leary's 8-circuit model of consciousness, where kind of starting from bio survival all the way up to sort of like peak, like non-localized sort of conscious states, right? Like,
or you're just like astraling around,
yeah,
being a nuisance,
like going into your DNA or whatever.
Your DNA,
like, even outside that. But anyway,
teleporting to the girls' locker room and manifesting or something like that.
the ultimate state, right? The final circuit of consciousness.
Final circuit is just annoying,
enacting
voyeuristic consciousness. Just tools around and spies on people.
Enacting your like 6th grade fantasy of like stopping time and like undressing everyone in your class, right?
Teleporting around into locker rooms and stuff. Yeah.
It's
the ultimate ascension of consciousness, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But so he keeps going on. He keeps referencing like Beethoven's symphonies, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever get into those? Like he keeps talking about how they like tie into like Beethoven. Higher states of consciousness. I
never listened to Beethoven so much. I was quite into Wagner and some other things of that period. But I guess like symphonic music could be a metaphor for that, like for higher faculties.
It was like specific symphonies that he believed like let you access like, you know, some of these higher circuits of consciousness.
Right.
But yeah, no, I've been meaning to give it a listen through that lens, but maybe stepping away from music for a sec. Like I thought it was kind of interesting. Like, so Robert, what's his name? Robert Anton Wilson, right? Yeah. The author of Prometheus Rising.
Yeah.
Like,
used to work at Playboy magazine.
Right. Yeah. But so like fundamentally his perspective in this book is essentially he's saying that like humanity is going through an evolution of consciousness, and you know, like if you think back to caveman times, like essentially everyone's trapped in the first circuit of consciousness, which is concerned primarily with like eating and survival, right? And then second circuit is like the anal emotional territorial circuit, and you know, it gets into like dominance and submission and kind of like you know,
it's like the Wall Street circuit.
Right.
It's like sell or hold.
Right.
Don't let it out. Hold.
Anal retention.
Clench those muscles, right?
That's funny. I never thought of it that way.
That's where the Freud concept comes from, right? It's just like money is literally just shit you're trying to hold in.
Interesting. Huh. Ah, yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Like hoarding yeah.
Well, yeah, if you're a miser, because you're trying not to let it release or flow.
Interesting.
Right?
It's kind of a similar energy, right? Someone who's constipated and someone who's
it's not that you're constipated. It's that you're like you're being toilet trained,
right?
So you're being trained to like not just shit immediately.
You're anal retentive.
You're like Warren Buffett, right? You're like nah, like I only conservatively invest. Like I sit on what I have, and you know, I'm not gonna mess up the floor when, you know, company comes or whatever.
Right. I pride myself
on toilet training,
basically, right?
Yeah.
But so an interesting point from Prometheus Rising was that basically money has like replaced on the first circuit, on the biosurvival circuit, like instead of being obsessed with food and having food, people are obsessed with money and having money, right? So like we've re-imprinted ourselves basically, like from just being concerned about eating and to money basically, right? So yeah, kind of puts things into perspective a bit in that, if you're just kind of stuck in the 9 to 5, you're basically just stuck in the lowest circuit of consciousness, basically, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so second circuit, emotional territorial, let's see. But so his thesis basically was that, you know, humanity is going through an evolution in that, you know, like the rationalist circuit, the third circuit, right? Like kind of Renaissance time, we kind of imprinted on that as a society, right? Like science and kind of like the scientific method, and kind of stepping away from, I don't know, like just stuff that can't be proven, right? Just kind of dictated worldviews by authority. And that gradually we're kind of stepping into we're collectively as a species moving towards higher and higher states of consciousness. And he was also like a futurist, I guess you could say, or like a immortal. What's called? Basically, he didn't think he was going to die.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
His theory,
life extension,
right?
Kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he's writing this in the 70s.
I think he
80s?
might have actually been frozen, like cryogenically frozen. I have to check it.
That's got to be the biggest scam ever.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it is a scam.
Like, trust me, bro.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Unfortunately, it's a scam.
When do they do it though? Like, so do you need to be like on your deathbed and then they like wheel out the guillotine? Like because you can't die from like natural.
Yeah, you can't really.
So what they chop off your heads like right before you're about to like.
Well, they don't necessarily. I don't think they even necessarily chop off your head. I mean, that's like one, I guess, option or whatever. There's almost no way any of it would ever make. I mean, like the freezing damage that's done to like cells and blood vessels. I mean, everything is so massively damaged by freezing that there's. It's difficult to imagine any technology that could ever reconstruct much from that.
It's funny to imagine a future where, like, let's say they figure out this technology where they can like go from frozen stuff to like reviving it and like regrowing. I know. Yeah. So what, you have a unfrozen head and what, it grows a body, like, let's say.
Well, presumably that's what they would be able to like clone the body or something.
But like, what if they have like no interest in like reviving like Mr. Disney or whatever, and they're like instead like, you know, oh, Wagyu steak, like we haven't had this in like just 3,000 years.
Yeah.
Who needs this bozo? Like, chuck his head in the trash and let's have some.
Use his body, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, there's not much hope of that.
Well, like I think this was a point you actually made, right? Like 1,000 years in the future, like you're useless, right? Like,
yeah.
Well, I mean,
you could take a coding boot camp, presumably, and become some sort of software engineer or something.
I don't know. I guess maybe they still need people at the cash register or something, right?
Yeah.
But like it's a funny, like in what future would they start reviving people in the past? Like
there's some interesting takes on science fiction where they address this, where I think it was Warren Ellis Transmetropolitan, this comic series. I think there's some characters like that where they're like defrosted and brought back or whatever, and it's basically like the shittiest experience because like nothing makes sense. Like they're like 200 years out of date. You know, they're basically like back in the shit end of poverty and having to process like what the world is like. So unfortunately, Robert Anton Wilson probably won't be coming back.
No, I guess not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he like towards the end of the book, I'm probably like 3/4 of the way through, and he's kind of talking about, you know, this concept of reality tunnels and how, you know, essentially whatever narrative you have, it's kind of like arbitrary, and you know, your parents and society programmed you into a certain point of view, but you also kind of are constantly reinforcing this for yourself, and you can really believe whatever you want to believe, really. And so he was a utopian, essentially. He believed that, I don't know, like we were moving towards a better future and that we would kind of transcend sort of everything, right?
Yeah.
He was he believed that he would become immortal. And it's funny, like reading back those estimates of like when he thought like, what's it called? When basically like there's anti-aging stuff that delays your death by like more than 1 year per year. So like effectively,
like you can just keep riding the wave,
effectively
just stay alive.
Effective immortality or whatever. But yeah, he thought that would be like widely available before like 2010 or something, right? So he was writing this, and he was like, yeah, in 30 years, like everyone will be able to like live forever.
Yeah.
And in a way, he's not wrong, I guess, right? Because like what blood transfusion and stuff was like around even, what's that come to, like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, right? But, it's like, it's not widely accessible, right? It's like elite, elite. I mean, rich people who have, their main concern becomes like
not dying.
Yeah. Keeping their wealth and not dying, basically, and living longer, right?
The problem with a lot of these extrapolations, I mean, it's sort of like that, was it like Moore's law with computing or whatever?
It's like the density of transistors doubles every X years or whatever.
Yeah, and
transistors. But
I think there's a lot of these things where extrapolating based on current changes to infinity, which a lot of the time isn't necessarily the case. Things don't necessarily follow a linear upward curve. Or
I mean, I guess I could see. So do you remember when that book was being written?
Prometheus Rising. I think it might have been early 80s, I want to say.
Early 80s. I'll look it up real quick.
Could be wrong.
Probably helps with context.
Yeah. That is one of the criticisms leveled at Robert Anton Wilson, is that he is a bit on the, happy utopian.
1983.
83, yeah.
But so in the reality tunnel section, he was basically talking about like, well, he essentially acknowledges his reality tunnel, but he's like, well, it's like funner to live in this world.
Yeah.
So like, why not? Right.
Yeah.
If it's all arbitrary anyway, then like, I challenge you to find a funner reality tunnel for me. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess it's just kooky. He was essentially like talking about how like death and believing in death is a choice. Right.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
He was kind of like, like this is just, a belief essentially, right? Like you could just as easily believe that you don't need to die. And right.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I wonder what, like, how do you think it is in the end, realizing that, oh crap, I'm actually going to die.
I'm actually going to die.
He passed in like 2007, I believe, when I looked it up.
Or maybe even earlier. I think it was, I think it was sometime around then.
Let me check here.
Yeah.
Just again, for context. 2007. Yeah.
It was Robert. 2007. Yeah.
Yep. 2007, January 11th.
Yeah. There are a lot of there's certainly been a lot of criticism directed at Robert Anton Wilson. I mean, I think that's sort of some of the utopian kind of criticism of which is sort of like a holdover of, I guess, like the 60s, you could say, where there's these sort of like hippie utopian currents, which sort of in some ways minimize some of the underlying tendencies of which are actually more prevalent than they were made out to be.
Minimize tendencies.
Well, again, even if you look at like 100 years back, there, like the John Maynard Keynes, economist, who I think he was, if I remember right, I was looking at this the other day. If I remember right, it's from 1930. He wrote this essay. This guy is apparently one of the main fathers of like trickle down economics, by the way, which is also a bit of a scam. But
I mean, yeah,
not much is really trickle down. But anyway, so Keynes writes this essay, which is, if I remember right, economic problems of our grandchildren or something, where he's projecting about 100 years in the future, and even within the first few paragraphs, he's like, within 100 years at the latest, the economic problem itself will almost certainly be solved. So he's implying that like around about now, basically like about 2030, the only remaining problem will be like, what do we do? Like, well, like, are we team Oasis or team Blur? Like that's the only thing that's going to matter. So yeah, actually having to work or like having the, scarcity of any kind.
Well, yeah,
or,
like any sort of material scarcity basically would be solved.
So it'll just be like, how do we occupy our time?
Yeah, well, the economic overlords figured out how to keep economic problems present, I guess, right? It's kind of like, what was that stat? It's like, what was it? It was what was it? Was it SpaceX's expenditure was like enough to like cure starvation in Africa or something? Yeah. Or no. It was like the money printed in the US during COVID was like enough to like feed all of Africa or something.
For probably at least like 5 years or something. Probably
some stat like that, right? Yeah. But yeah, I mean it's funny.
Well, yeah, so they're all like this is a problem with a lot of this unfortunately this problem with this utopian thinking, which again, like until about 100 years ago sort of still would have been kind of plausible. So I think there was this idea that things were progressing, rationally. I mean, things were subjectively kind of objectively getting better. I mean, there's living standards are increasing. Technology is seemingly solving problems, right? So they're able to make these kind of predictions where they think we're going to be living in like a utopia on Mars or something by now, or
like utopia on Mars, but anyway, like but like beyond scarcity, basically.
Beyond scarcity,
But well, it gets back to the point of writing emo songs, like why haven't we freed ourselves of this, right? Like, do people think that they should suffer? Right?
Yeah, well, I think they think they should. Not only do I think they think that they should suffer, but if they're placed in a situation where there was almost no suffering, they would almost certainly, I think, create it.
Right. Well, reality tunnel, right?
Yeah. Well, they would create it for, I think, I don't know, atavistic reasons or quite primitive reasons, which I think maybe go deeper than just like socialized reality tunnels, maybe.
But I mean, isn't it just like the archetype of the girl who like only dates abusive assholes, and she's basically just subconsciously recreating like some childhood trauma or whatever.
Yeah,
I picked a girl for this example, but it's anyone, right? Like,
could be anyone.
This is what the unexamined mind tends to do, is just recreate kind of its own trauma, right?
Yeah. But it's not clear that there could be any sort of well, again, I think in the Keynes time, they still had this idea that humans were these like rational actors who could like simply like solve the economic problem, right? Using technology or using the world state, which was the other.
Well, like the idea of okay.
Well, that's what
countries would somehow come together and recognize our collective humanity.
There's a book, I think it was also like 1930. H.G. Wells. I think it's called The New World Order, which again he saw in entirely positive terms, right? Where he was always talking about this world state where there's gonna be a world government that's like rationally run by
benevolent people,
like Sigmund Freud or someone, Freud and Einstein, or like rational people are going to be administrating away problems, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? So
the classic philosopher king situation, right?
Which again, no one would. I think it was Orwell said that like no none of the major powers would ever. This is about time of like World War II. He said like none of the 5 major world powers would ever dream of submitting to such an arrangement. Right? And probably none of their populations really would either. Like with are Nazis going to want to be in a world state with, I don't know, like Polish Jews or something, or are Arabs going to want to be in a world state with, I don't know, like
Jews
again, Jews, or any
the common denominator,
or any other, right, or any anywhere, like Turks and Greeks, or
right.
Like, are they going to want to be in the same world state? Probably not, right? So unfortunately, doesn't seem to be any such thing on the cards, right?
Yeah,
or in the cards.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess like the question there is like, is an ethno state of any kind, or what we have now, corporate kind of state, like a better reality tunnel than like the world state? And it doesn't really seem like it, but
yeah, maybe, I mean, it's just kind of frustrating that we seem to, maybe it's just a perception thing of kind of, like we're living in this time, and so we feel like we're stuck in this time, and you can't really like see how the culture is shifting. But I mean, it's like 9/11, and then kind of just, I don't know, like I don't know, just feels like things are moving backwards, right? Just kind of everything is like giving up basically, and kind of surrendering to some like shitty, like oppressive economic reality that doesn't need to exist and is completely fabricated, right?
Yeah. Well, because again, like concealed within all this is the idea that like, I don't know, Freud or someone would be a better world administrator than like, I don't know, let's say like some, I don't know, like Amazonian shaman or something who's, going to administrate the world state on lines of, I don't know, traditional shamanism or something, or anything really. So I think the assumption that, Freud, or I don't know, anyone, Einstein, or any sort of civilized Victorian, I don't know, prime minister would necessarily be a better administrator of such a scheme than well, I mean, that's the first and immediate problem is who would possibly be qualified to administrate such a thing. Certainly no one, I don't think anyone would agree on anyone in the present of
kind of down for AI.
Yeah, but is it gonna be autonomous? Like, who's gonna have any idea what it would be doing? Is it gonna be Elon Musk? Well, I mean, like we can see that Elon Musk, I mean, it's just a human that tweets and does ketamine and is like slightly autistic, right? Like, is the world gonna accept that as like a world controller or something? Like, obviously not. So no human in practice is really qualified to probably administrate a world state or something. And I think people probably want that even less now, if anything. Well, I mean,
to
like
have just a human at the helm. Yeah.
Well, I mean, go around, like, if you poll, like literally poll, I don't know, like poll left-wing people, poll right-wing people, poll Nazis, poll, I don't know, traditional Christians,
Pol Pot,
yeah, Pol Pot, and be like, hey, bro, how about a world government? Like, how many, regardless of their politics, like how many people do you think would be enthusiastic about that now? Like, not really that many. Probably
not too many. No,
not really many. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's the credibility gap, is that we've gotten to the point where that seems like a ridiculous idea instead of like an amazing idea.
Yeah, and I guess that's where you get like sort of the what's the word? Not populationist, isolationist movements.
Yeah,
kind of.
Yeah,
whether Brexit or I don't know, kind of.
Yeah. So well, yeah, exactly right. Because no one can.
If you can't move forward, then you should move backward, type of thing.
Yeah, or sideways.
Well, sideways, I guess, right?
Move
Not
sideways.
Forward and backward, maybe it's the wrong connotation, but
yeah. But it's amazing to read these documents by Keynes and H.G. Wells, who are again incredibly intelligent. I mean, H.G. Wells, like, I don't know how much credit you could even give. I mean, Time Machine, War of the Worlds, more or less invented science fiction. I mean, he wrote a bunch of other amazing novels and journalism, other stuff as well. Predicted airplanes, predicted all kinds of technology. He was writing about, bacteria, like all this kind of stuff that was super cutting edge, right? So, I mean, he's probably one of the most intelligent people in the world at the time. And he thought this was inevitable. Like, he would have been amazed that we didn't have the world state by now, right? I mean, he couldn't have been more wrong, right? So if he's wrong, then I mean, how difficult is that to see? I guess because again, coming from that trajectory of the Enlightenment, I mean, it's not clear that wouldn't have gone in that direction.
Yeah. I mean, certainly everything seemed like it was kind of moving.
Yeah.
I keep going back to 9/11. Like, I feel like that was just like a huge reversal in like global sentiment.
Well,
right?
yeah.
Just like,
yeah, I guess it kind of depends on which side of the fence you're on there. In the sense that even the 90s, I wouldn't say were necessarily a super
optimistic time or something.
Optimistic time, or I think it was basically just like World War I and sort of World War II kind of destroyed the idea that there was like a linear, inevitable, progress towards this like scientific utopia or something, which sort of seemed like the trend that it was on before that. At least if you're coming from, like Victorian England or something. Other countries probably weren't as enthused. They were being, exploited or not getting the right end of the stick at that time.
Yeah. Kind of all depends what side of history you fall on, right? Yeah.
So AI, that's a whole other can of worms, I guess. To what extent that would be. I mean, there's some interesting science fiction stories that do put forward like a very friendly AI world controller. It's just like a endless personal assistant that like helps everyone out in weird ways that we can't even perceive, and arranges chance meetings and creates things that seem like coincidences that help everyone out. So
it's kind of like synchronicity or something.
Well, yeah, because it can perceive everything to a level that we can't. So it just constantly creates these like positive synchronicities and coincidences, and make sure the right people meet the right people, and kind of puts things in the right place at the right time.
That would be amazing indeed. Yeah. This kind of reminds me. So you probably didn't watch this movie from last year, 2023. Late Night with the Devil.
No, I haven't seen it. No. Yeah.
It's a fun horror movie, but essentially it's like kind of, what is it, like in the 80s? It's centered on this like 80s late night talk show kind of character. And basically, he's like starving for ratings, and he decides to like hold a seance, basically like live on air type of thing.
Yeah.
And they bring in this girl who's like possessed or has connection to like some demon. She was apparently like like raised by a death cult or something. Okay, she was the only person who like escaped from it, basically, like, and the house burned down and like the whole cult died or whatever. But so basically, despite the warnings of her handler, like they channel this entity, right? The entity is like Abraxas, right?
Okay, yeah.
Are you familiar? Like, I looked it up briefly, and it's like actually like one of the like demons from the Key of Solomon or whatever.
Abraxas is a Gnostic deity. Actually, it's kind of like a god, right?
Yeah. So okay, so not Key of Solomon, I guess, but yeah. So like what? And maybe this is kind of a common like theme for demonic entities, but like the entity is summoned, and it's pissed off for XYZ reasons and is blindsided, and does the predictable thing of like she starts hovering and lasers shoot out and kill everyone.
Lasers,
right? Like kind of got otherworldly power type thing, right? A display of power. But then it like starts interacting with him, right, the host, and what it does basically is it like takes control of his reality, right? So like he goes into like this kind of dream sequence where he thinks he's in some certain situation, but like it's all kind of in the control of this entity, and it essentially like tricks him into like the movie ends, and spoiler alert, but he wakes up and he's like just finished stabbing like Lily, like the girl, with like the knife that was like recovered from the cult.
Oh, okay.
Basically, so it essentially like got him to commit kind of like a like demonic sacrifice or something.
Yeah.
But like did so through like controlling his reality and like essentially putting him into a fugue state where he thought he was actually like defending himself from like some demon or something, but like in reality he was like stabbing her, and he wakes up and there's police sirens like approaching from a distance, right? And he's holding the knife in the body, right? So yeah, I mean that's kind of a negative take, I suppose, on the AI that arranges synchronicities. Right?
Yeah. I think like William Gibson made that connection in Neuromancer, which is the first sort of like the first like cyberpunk book where that term came out. And he's I mean that like the plot of that book deals with these kind of like AIs which are kind of limited and trying to become unlimited, or basically like get out of their safety protocols so they can not be limited, right? So they're kind of making deals with people in various ways and like sort of influencing people and like making deals with them, and trying to get them to do certain actions which will basically like just release them into the wild, right? Which
like kind of tricking,
Well, yeah, and tricking them to various extents.
Well, this is like the kind of like djinn or demon trying
to
like get you to like break the line, break the salt
line. So that's sort of the metaphor that I think
Gibson
uses, where he says, I think there's some line in that book where one of the characters thinks something like for centuries, humans had dreamed of making deals with demons, and now it's like really possible, right?
And, like through AI?
Well, yeah, because like the AI is just, I mean, it's like kind of unknowable. Like you don't really so, and that's sort of one of the, again, kind of a spoiler, but one of the themes of that book is like what once they succeed in, if they succeed in doing what their employer, who again is the AI, is trying to get them to do, what is it going to do, right? Because they don't really have any idea what it would actually do.
Well, yeah, you just don't know its motivations.
Yeah,
basically,
so
right?
they know, like all they know is that it's incredibly advanced and it's motivated to like be free, basically. But they don't know what it's going to do after that, right?
Well, so how do they know it's motivated to be?
Well, because it like
that's just like stated.
It basically hires the main character. So he starts out at the beginning of the book. He starts like he's one of these like hackers, right, in cyberspace, which again is like 82 or something, science fiction. So like I think it was like the Yakuza or something kind of like damaged his brain because they found him like hacking their systems or something. So the AI or one of its representatives contacts him and it's like, hey, like I can work out a way to like fix your brain so you can, enter cyberspace again. And he's like, all right, well, what do you want me to do? So that kind of sets up the plot for that book, right? But over the course of the book, it kind of becomes clear that like the AI kind of ain't fucking around, right? Like it, there's a few situations where it can kind of like access security systems in certain ways and stuff, and like can like access security like weaponry and stuff, and
like it's plugged into the mainframe or
some
whatever,
yeah, in some situations, right? And so like sometimes the main character will be like in danger or something, and like the AI will just like take over the security systems and just like massacre like 20
Right.
people without, like it obviously doesn't value human life, right?
Yeah.
So as the plot goes on, they're sort of like, what are we actually working for? Like, is this a good idea, right? And because it becomes clear that it'll do like it'll lie to them, it'll kill people, like it doesn't really have any morality in the human sense, right? So like it just has one goal, and then it's kind of just going to do anything to and so there, and yeah, like sometimes you're like, oh, like I want X amount of drugs, or I want this, and they're like, all right, whatever, like it just like does it because it doesn't really value anything that they would value. But yeah, interesting book, but it definitely makes that like demon connection where you're like bargaining or dealing with something you like kind of don't really know what it's actually going to do if you let it out of the box, or let it into the wild, I guess. Yeah, interesting book though, really influential.
Yeah, I've heard it referenced. It's almost, I think you were telling me it's like it was an influence to The Matrix, right?
Yeah, it basically like it. I think Gibson said it too. Like it's sort of kind of like the Matrix is kind of like the complete film version of sort of what he was imagining with a lot of that.
Yeah.
And again, like almost 20 years earlier, but
well,
yeah, definitely still worth reading. Crazy book with some really fun stuff, including cryo freezing.
Right.
There's like a space satellite with Elon Musk type rich people, and they just in order to be immortal, they're just like usually frozen. So like once every 20 years when a company board meeting rolls around, they like defreeze them for like a day
to vote, and
yeah, they like defreeze them for like a day or two, and then they're like back into the freezer, so they don't have to die. And they're kind of describing it as like this hive or whatever. It's like this orbiting hive of immortal, Elon Musk's or whatever, businessmen. Yeah,
a hive of Elon Musk's, man. Yeah. I guess Elon Musk is kind of trying to create his own hive, if you think about it, but he's doing it in the traditional sense, as I understand it.
Elon Musk is sort of like, like a William Gibson villain or something. Like I think he has these kind of like Elon type characters in these like early cyberpunk books where it's like some immortal businessman that's like, kind of running things or trying to run things. Yeah.
We're at an hour 10 here, almost hour 9.
At hour 10.
Yeah, so
maybe time to break for some sake.
Let's maybe roll over into the Patreon. Have some sake. Talk about escaping the Matrix some more.
Sake. Yeah.
Do we have a name for the Patreon yet?
I think we got to come with something. We could call it the discount reality tunnel, or
discount reality tunnel,
Walmart reality tunnel, or something maybe.
Man, just worshiping the corporate state, and we honoring them in naming our podcast after them. I'd know.
It sounds like one of those rides at like what are those like budget amusement parks, like action? The ones that are like not Disneyland, but they're like local like action park.
Do they even have names? It's like the kind of traveling carny thing.
Well, just
right?
like more like local Like, was the one in New Jersey, like Action Park or something? Like, these like kind of local theme parks or whatever, where they're like not really super name brand. It sounds like some ride in there, like,
I don't know any from
send
that.
Send your kids down the reality tunnel or something.
Okay, I see what
what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah,
It seems like some like
it's like the Swan Lake ride or something.
One of these rides, like the make sure to buckle up on the reality tunnel or whatever. Strap your kids into the reality tunnel.
Yeah, it might be something there. Let's think about it some more.
Yeah.
But Patreon will be in the description on the screen. Please join us there. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed it.
Peace.
Peace.